Hi, everybody. Shavua Tov. This is Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. It is quite late on Saturday night, December 15th, 2018. Already, though, the 8th day of Tevet, 5779. And I'm very happy and grateful that they came to my house, to Dr. Menachem Gottesman and his wife, Leah Gottesman. And they are here to be interviewed, or we'll talk about the new book that they've just published, Not at Risk, Education as a Work of Heart, about the school Meled that they've been running for many years, and about how to get kids to reach their potential and not be lost. I just want to say, and we'll talk about it during the course of the interview, we've had a really difficult week here in the Land of Israel, as I'm sure all of you know. And so our prayers and our thoughts are, first of all, with those who are still fighting for their lives. And we have 2 soldiers who are still in critical condition in the hospital. And please, everyone, pray for them. And also a young woman who's also, I think she's out of danger, but she still needs our prayers. And of course, our condolences to the families who last Shabbat had loved ones and had a very different kind of future that they were thinking of. Of course, Shira and Amichai Yishran and their baby, Amiyad Yisrael, whom they buried this week. So it's just been a lot of thoughts, a lot of prayers, a lot of tears this week. And also, I have to say, though, a lot of pride in my people, because what might not be known to the public are some of the amazing things that happened this week. Just a little story, and then we'll start our talk with Dr. Menachem Gottesman. But there was supposed to be an engagement party in Kidumim this week, and the soldier who was supposed to get engaged didn't get out for his own engagement party because they brought more soldiers into the Shomron, to the Binyamin area, because of what happened. And as a result, Ofra, the community where the shooting happened and where he was being based, quickly organized an engagement party. They moved the whole thing to Ofra. He got half an hour out from the army and ran over there. And with all the tragedy and with all the grief, we are going to turn up the light higher and make sure that the good things happen and that the enemy doesn't allow us to stop doing those things as well. So within all that, when you live here, you also see the fine things that are happening and how people respond to these terrible situations. But on to Dr. Menachem Gottesman, and he and his wife Leah have known for many, many years. And so what is Meled? This is your life's work. Tell us a little bit about the school and what you've been doing for the past few decades.
Well, Meled is a school that was created 1995 as a pilot project with the specific purpose of trying to take kids that are in need of either an alternative school system or kids already that have dropped out and have given up on their education. The purpose over here was to try to create an environment in which we could help these kids return back to a learning situation, and also help restore them back into society as productive contributing members. It began with a small group of students that I personally interviewed, usually on the streets of Jerusalem, and I found out one thing about these kids. They all want to learn, they all want to live, they all want to continue, and they also know that ultimately they could have a future that they're at this particular point they really weren't sure about, but I think they feel that there's a future that they could ultimately reach. Mm-hmm. So this is what we've been doing. You know, after the pilot project, we then became after 2 years on my own. It came to the attention of the Ministry of Education, the State of Israel, and they had asked me to bring it officially into the system. And the school, as of today, has completed about 20 years, and pretty close to 1,000 students have graduated, and they have been, some of these kids have been doing some fantastic things, not only completing their studies and attending, participating in the Army, and national service, but also have gone on to the universities and higher studies and are married and have created families. It's a beautiful story about young people that society, in a sense, I wouldn't want to say gave up on them, but they didn't know what to do with them. And I think we found we created a pleasant environment for them in order to give them the opportunity to begin to find out who they really are. And that's what we've been doing.
So when we talk about, and that's the title of the book, not at risk, because that seems to be the term that's bandied about right now, youth at risk. Not just here in Israel, but all over the world, where whatever educational framework is now about, that idea of a classroom and a board and a teacher, a lot of kids aren't fitting into. I don't know if it's more than it was. I remember growing up, we had kids. I mean, there were very few dropouts in high school that I remember. I'm sure there were some, but mostly people struggled their way through. But now it seems to be, and I'd like to have your understanding of is it more now? And if so, why? Is it because it seems like everyone's ADD right now, like nobody has the patience to sit in a classroom for an hour anymore? Is that because of computers? Is that because of the faster pace that the world is in? Is that because there's more distractions of cell phones and other things that we didn't have 20 or 25 years ago? Is it a combination of all of that? I mean, what, in your opinion, it has led to a situation now that is perhaps more severe than it used to be?
Well, Eve, I think I'm taking first of all, I totally agree with you. All of the factors that you mentioned may contribute to the problem that we're facing now. But I'm looking at it a little differently. Classrooms today are very closed, very boxed in. Works very routine, very high pressured. And there's a need for new ways of presenting education, which would make it easier for students to feel that schools are not prisons, and schools are not only you come to learn, academically. There are many other components of education that the general school system has not yet, been able to totally grasp with it. So what we did is we did something more creative, in which we're talking about a student-centered school rather than a curriculum-centered school. So if the student is the center, everything around that student evolves, and staff and faculty, everybody else is responsible for the individual, his growth, his development, his well-being, his interest. What we've created what we call giving students much more freedom in selection of what they study, also understanding the dynamics and the needs of change that occurs. Adolescence, during the time that students learn in high schools today, there are all kinds of growth, developmental patterns that one must take into consideration to understand the needs. It may be that there's also a lack of real communication today between the educators and students, and students are just being turned off. They just don't feel very good about how they are being related to. And all of these problems together may cause students to really decide, well, I think I've had enough. Maybe there are other things that I could do in life. And that's not really true, because our understanding is that most kids want to continue. They see a bright future. They understand their responsibilities. Once they feel that they're in control, once they feel that they're accepted, once they feel that they're valued, once they feel that they're coming to a place that education is important, but there are other things that are important: relationships, spiritual connections, understanding, respecting, valuing, accepting kids as they are, not overloading them with beliefs, but giving them opportunity to explore their own feelings and come to their own conclusions. And kids have to feel happy going to school, and I feel today that kids do it because that's what 90% of society does. But that doesn't mean that we're totally giving kids all of the things that we should, in the sense of making them feeling better about themselves, society, those around them, giving them a feeling of hope in the sense of relating to family, society. It's just giving kids a better feeling about themselves. I think that's
so. What you're describing, though, should be the obvious for anybody. I mean, it shouldn't just be a special school for helping kids feel good about themselves. This should be a given that, especially during the teenage years, which are with the hormones and the insecurities and the transitioning between childhood and adulthood and the responsibilities, this should be like just the basics. So why a special school? I mean, the kids that you take in, what is there a common denominator among them that has you picking them off the street because they haven't managed in a regular framework? Were the regular educational frameworks failing here? Or maybe it's not the educational frameworks. Were the families failing here? A few weeks ago, I interviewed Paul Shaviv about educator who, it was one of the most depressing interviews that I have to tell you I've ever done. And I had some listeners who wrote to me that told me they turned it off in the middle. Okay. Because he was basically saying that the way that we educate now is doomed, especially the private education is too expensive. It's not sustainable. But he didn't have a solution. So now I'm thinking about, I've already raised my kids, but I have grandchildren and I love children in general. Where are we going with this? How are we somehow switching things up that we don't have kids on the street who you have to pick up and start a school for? How can we make this bigger?
Okay, first of all, it's not we're not only talking about a school that picks up kids off the street. We're also talking about kids that are looking for alternatives to the system, which doesn't necessarily mean that they've dropped out.
Okay, so not all the kids in your school had nowhere else to go, and it was there, or the social services. Correct. They moved because they felt that your school was a warm environment, and that was better for them. Right. Terrific. Okay, good.
Okay. Based on almost 20 years of experience, I would say that a lot of these kids that are looking for alternatives are very honest with themselves. My feeling is that a great deal of these kids are very creative, very energetic, have a lot of potential, and they just felt that the system is not recognizing and dealing, with their potential. Once we get these kids really moving, and this is what we've done, we've seen how far they could go, and ultimately, I would say part of this group, they are brave souls in the sense that they're looking for something else. Now, I think this, in a sense, reflects what other kids may be looking for and should receive. But these are the kids that are saying, we've had enough, we're looking for something else.
But how come it comes out a lot of times, not every time, by acting out? Like, how come teenagers can't go to the system? Is the system so overwhelming and say, listen, we want to learn differently. We need something different. It's just too overwhelming and it needs to come from top down?
Well, most systems are, everything is based on tests. Most systems are rigid. Most systems are very pragmatic. I must say, sometimes inflexible, looking for grades, achievement, forgetting that kids need, besides formal study, need informal study, need to volunteer, need to learn much more about the world. I used to joke around in the school, say, I'd love to have the kids just come 1 day a week to school and 4 days or 5 days out in the real world. Trips and volunteering and working. I encourage all of the kids in the afternoons to take some time to learn what the value of money, time, responsibility. There are so many things that the schools don't factor in. They see themselves as a factory in which the kids have to come in, come out. We're not a factory. School should not be a factory. School should be a place in which kids want to learn, they want to live, they want to continue, they want to feel productive. A lot of the feelings are not expressed because you could claim, well, if there are 35 kids in the class, how are they going to be able to do it? I think if they really set their mind, certainly the system could do much more to accommodate the needs of the kids. Based on your original question, why today? Because I think today kids are much more, they want to be counted. They want to be in the forefront. They want to have, they want to have a say in their own destiny. They want to choose. They also want to feel good.
So we're going to turn now to Leah because she has some things that she wants to say also. Leah, what is your position in the school here, working with your husband? What's your role to play in the school?
Well, from the time that Menachem started the program, I was involved very much in the PR. I had a background in marketing, and I was very concerned about him getting the support he needed and getting the word out in order that the school could continue. What he didn't share, for one, is that we ourselves experienced the dropout phenomenon in our family. Our son, our youngest son, actually didn't drop out. He was ejected from the system. And I don't know if, you think of the football image, the idea to kick a kid out like he's a football, right? And at the time when it happened, and it was during the Gulf War, and there were sirens, sounding off in Israel, and we didn't know where. At any one point, we had to put on our gas mask and where the Scud missiles would find us. And here, our son, in the middle of that, was told that he'd be better off in the streets, this kind of thing, which certainly very much, brought the Ministry of Education close to our hearts. We were really angry. Right. And what we found is that in the exploration that he had with himself and trying to get his own self-dignity back, and it was very difficult for him after the system sort of rejected him, that what happened is we realized that all of the authorities were basically saying that he has nothing going for him. And here we had a son who we loved dearly and who was brought up in a rather nurturing home. And we said this couldn't be. And so sometimes even all the professionals, the social workers, the psychologists can lose sight of what a kid, what's really working inside, an adolescent's mind. And unbelievable, how they could, just write off kids. So you could imagine that when he was in the army and felt that he had a sense of belonging and was able to hold his head up high and go for an actual valuation of issues, and found out that he, he was hyperactive, terrible. Turns out that some of the greatest people in the world do the most amazing things in that. And as a result, he said, okay, you guys now have to create a school for a kid like me. So that gave us the greatest impetus of anything. And of course, I was charged with being able to promote this because of our own personal experience, and realizing that we can't not only kick kids around like footballs, but we also have to recognize how phenomenal. As Menachem has always said, the kids that he's worked with are the greatest kids in the world. And they become the most amazing, the most amazing, most productive human beings once they realize that people will give them a choice and trust them. And the fact is that we know today, and that's what's so ironic, we know that there's many different kinds of intelligence, so that if somebody is good in sports, like, wow, encourage him and let him have that kind of dignity and that kind of, really great, exactly, the great feedback that he gets from that in order to give him more support in whatever else he wants to do with his life. So it's not a matter of pressuring kids during their high school years to just that they have to fit into a specific mold, but giving them the school is the opportunity to give them the impetus to go out there and choose what they really are capable of doing. So much at what Menachem has done in this school is about informal education, giving them a chance to explore themselves, whether it's musically, whether it's out in nature, whether it is, in writing something, whether it's literally helping people volunteering or working and finding out that they have so much going in order to believe in themselves. At the end of the day, it's not that they've turned their back on education or the formal learning classroom, but that they're actually finding out what tremendous potential they have and to trust themselves. And that's why the motto that Menachem used in the school, the most, let's say, popular motto that the kids then come back and repeat is the ball is in your court. Because once they really understand that they could be responsible, that they'll be trusted with that responsibility, wow, they become the most phenomenal human beings, and they take care of one another. And that's like the most beautiful thing in the school. They care about the other students, not just about getting past an exam. And
once they're not tagged with you're a bad kid or what, which...
No, by the way, there's no such thing as a bad kid. And we've had some kids, okay. All we say is that maybe the kid hasn't done something good, but he'll never be bad. The other thing is that we look at people or youngsters as youngsters. We don't focus on the problem. The person is the person. The person may have a problem, but that's not the issue. You have to know where the emphasis lies. It lies primarily on each individual who is really honestly searching for something that is meaningful in his life.
So one of the things that happens in the religious world that we share, the more orthodox Jewish world, is that when a kid is feeling unhappy or rebelling or somehow wanting to get the message out that something's wrong, there are signals that are given. The kippah comes off the head of the boy, and the girl starts dressing maybe in very immodest ways, trying to get attention in ways that it's not healthy attention that she's trying to get. And so to some degree, I think the religious world maybe gets a clue. And I know also from some of my listeners who live in a conservative Christian world, they have the same kinds of issues that might come up, that it's easy to then get the parents upset with them and kind of make a statement, something's going on here, by looking as if they're rebelling against the framework of the house, also of the home and of the school. So I would imagine that some of the kids who end up in Meled are kids who've come from more traditional homes, and this is their cry that they need something different.
Okay, that's very interesting what you're talking about, because a certain percentage of students come from religious homes and backgrounds, and their defiance of religion is a defiance, is a cry. But when the school doesn't pressure religiously and gives them a better feeling of who they are, then they, in turn, based on our experience, are able to create how they want to return or become part of their family or their community or their religious identity. They need the time and the space to reconsider without pressure.
And without it being a power struggle, because anytime something turns into a power struggle, then that's going to be where you're going to have the kickback.
There's something that comes to mind because many students would drop into our home also on the Sabbath and want to have a chance to interact with Menachem in an extended time period. And one of them, I will never forget, he said, after the years that I've spent at this school and all that you've shown me, the school has shown about how important I am. I'll never forget, he said, now I can believe. And what it really meant is he can believe in God because he believed in himself.
And because you believed in him, so you let him believe in himself. And faith is faith, right? In something that you have self-worth, that there's a bigger plan for you, that you have a special gift that Hashem wants you to succeed at. I mean, once we find that, right? The sages say that you have to educate each child in the fidarko, like in his own way. And that's the trick of parenting, I think, and of for educators as well. And ultimately, parents are educators. I mean, we are. We're big educators. We don't have the degree for it, and we're thrown into that very unprepared. But ultimately, that's what we are supposed to be doing.
What I didn't mention, Eve, is that the young man who said that to us was Yosef Goodman, who then went on with tremendous passion and fervency to serve in the army and in a training accident in a very elite unit. He gave up his life to save his officer when their cables intertwined. But the fact is, he came to a very unbelievable place because he felt that life was so important, and that he felt that he could believe in not only in himself, but he could believe in all of those around him, including the Almighty.
So you mentioned Yosef Goodman, and of course this week's Torah portion was about Joseph and about Yosef. And what is very odd is that the two soldiers who were killed last week also had Yosef in their name. One more Yosef, his last name, one Yosef Cohen, his first name, which is just kind of very eerie. And they were killed at this place called Givat Asaf, at this place, which also is the origin for Yosef's name. So there's a lot of messages that I can't in any way make heads or tails of. But it just brings me to a conversation that I had with my oldest daughter this week, who herself is parenting. She's almost 13 years old, my oldest granddaughter. And they were talking about the terrible week and about the terrorism. And one of the things that my daughter said to her daughter was, look, we're not going to even deal with the terrorists. We're not going to deal with the enemy. We have to be good people. We have to be deserving of good things happening to us. And that's not nowhere we can go. And I happen to disagree with her, because I think that we're all here. And these are also people who are being educated. And while I understand what she's trying to say is that we can only, and maybe even barely, control ourselves and our own behavior, how much can we impact on other people's behavior? It rings a little bit badly for me because of a lot of the work that I do. And, over the years, the history that I've learned, a lot of times people have kind of gotten themselves off the hook in their persecuting of Jews by saying, well, what do you want from me? Your own prophet said you were going to be punished, so don't get mad at us. You were doomed. And I don't like that, because people do have choices to make. So how do you think in terms of, because we are living in a real cauldron here in the Middle East, especially in Israel, and we have people being educated maybe 5 minutes from where we're sitting right now in a way that is not giving them self-confidence, that is not giving them any sense of self-worth. If anything, it's a culture that is teaching them to want death and to want to take other people down with them. Do you think, as an educator, as someone who has so much experience here, that there is any way that can be changed? I mean, here we are trying within our Jewish world to fix some of the problems that are happening in education. Do you think that there's any way that you can take some of the experience that you have had here and perhaps even try and change some of what's going on, in the Palestinian Authority or in the Arab world? Or is that something that is just so beyond that they're just going to have to do it on their own, and we're just going to have to protect ourselves and hope that they succeed? Because so much of the root of what we're seeing now is in their educational system, and what they're being told are the ideal values, so you kill people and you get a school named after you and your family gets tons of money. Is there any way here? Is there any hope to being able to change that?
Well, we certainly can't talk about, it's very much related, to the politics and the and the agenda. But certainly, one can envisage that kids all over the world, given opportunities to feel much freer, to explore, to begin to feel value, acceptance, to feel that there are, there's something more than just going out and hating, your fellow neighbors. I certainly feel I'm very, very optimistic that kids really want to look for the good. They want to feel good.
Nobody's born evil.
Nobody is born evil. Nobody is bad. There is, I'm very, very optimistic that things can change.
But on a practical level, because Jews are tremendously optimistic, and we're always feeling like everyone's good out there, but in a very real sense, because we live in the Middle East. We don't live on some island where everybody's just floating around and looking happy. We live in a place where we bear the brunt and we pay in blood for people educating their children towards hatred and towards violence. Is there any way, have you met with anybody, or it's too big because it's cultural, it's religious, it's like it's more than we can even begin to try and affect right now?
No, I certainly on a personal and professional level would love to meet with a number of principals of a number of schools and sit with them and talk to them. I don't think that would be a problem. Actually, in the city of Jerusalem, as a member of the forum of principals, there were Arab principals that were participating. There's politics on one level and policy and agenda, but on another level, sometimes principals and teachers can certainly be more amenable to change. The question is if there's a willingness, or, it's not closed hermetically that nothing could be done.
Well, I mean, so you're saying there are some teachers that are doing that there?
Our dialogue with the principals representing, some of the principals representing, East Jerusalem, we were able to talk to them. We communicated. They were willing to listen to us. We were willing to listen to them. Even if you make a small step to depoliticize education just a little bit, for a little hope, then I think just like, making a small hole and then the water, it could rush out like a dam.
Well, I don't think we can be naive enough to say that they're within their culture, the teachers and the principals can just change things around, because they're going to be intimidated, and there's a whole lot of pressure that they have from things that we have no control over whatsoever. But at least, let's say, when it comes to within the Israeli school system, 20% of Israelis are Muslims. Within their school systems, is there, a move towards what you're talking about in terms of, getting the kids to feel like life is good and you're a good person. You don't have to go in a way that's evil and bad.
No, to the best of my knowledge, I would hope that the schools, the Arab schools here in Israel, would certainly be much more amenable to change within the system, and de-emphasize, politics, and emphasize more coexistence.
I'm not even talking about coexistence. I'm talking about within their own culture, putting an emphasis on having a life that's fulfilling and good without it being controlled by the hatred, which just eats away at everybody, as we've seen.
Well, we're seeing anyway in Israel more and more of the Arab schools Israel is investing, more funds for education, in more remedial intervention, changing the level of the amount of matriculation examinations that these students have to deal with. We're seeing more and more students today entering universities. Universities are today much more amenable to accepting, and even going on to, besides university studies, areas like medicine or pharmacy. There's a much more openness today of opportunities.
Well, I mean, I have to say, half of the pharmacists in Israel now are Israeli Arabs, and one of my sons is studying medicine in Italy because we have affirmative action here, and more Arabs are getting in than Jews. So there needs to be, I think, a little bit of a. All right, so I'm not talking about so much the opportunities that are open to them, because actually I find that more opportunities are open to Muslim Arabs in Israel sometimes than are to Jews, who also have to do the army and have a lot of responsibilities. So I don't want to. That happens to be a very sore point with me. I'm talking more about what you're talking about is that idea of having, feeling good about themselves, not needing to conform to something that's perhaps not healthy for them. But it's a hard thing. I understand, because we're going up against, as we said, cultural and religious issues that are way out of what we can control.
But theoretically, it's possible.
Yeah. Theoretically, a lot of things are possible. Right.
The model that we created at Mellon is open and can be studied and transformed to any culture.
Okay. So one of the you want to read something, Leah, from the book?
Sure. I would love to read. Apropos what you were discussing about about kids, about youth, about their image of themselves in this world. I just wanted to read from one of the. In the book, we have a lot of accounts that the students wrote themselves. Matter of fact, every account that they sent us, we included, and it was all translated into English. And so there's just some lines here that I thought may be appropriate. Here, this student, this graduate, is referring to what was it a she or he? It's a she. What she learned from the school. I learned very many things about my life beyond what the education ministry suggests that we learn. I learned that there are very good people in the world. I learned that there are people with more difficult lives than mine. I learned that there are people right next to me who suffer from problems at home. I learned that I can help. I learned that offering a listening ear can help other people very much. I learned to be responsible. I learned a lot at Mellon about accepting others. I learned what true friendship is.
So apropos what you're saying right now, I mean, the focus has been more now about the educational system, perhaps not giving kids the opportunity to explore different directions. But what about the home? All right. Are you finding that some of these kids who are more at risk to act out in ways that ultimately are not healthy for them or anybody else around them, and some of these kids that you've gotten now focused on their strengths and have put them on a path that will lead to them having success in their lives? But what about the home? I mean, we don't just send our kids to school for 8 or 9 hours a day or whatever it is, and the teacher shapes their personality. Are there homes that are too critical? Are there homes where any kid who is, I think all of us are, I'll certainly blame myself on that, have certain requirements or expectations of our children that when they're not met, we get disappointed. And some parents might say, what, you only got a 90 on a test? And other parents might say, well, why don't you want to be in the school play? Or why aren't you this? Or why don't you have friends? Where does the home and the acceptance at home of these kids who very often are the most creative thinkers, how does that play into where these kids end up?
Okay, well then let me just share this with you, because this is some of the advice given to parents. And by the way, a great deal of the dialogue that's conducted in the school is also this, some of the messages that are given to the students are also given to the parents.
100%.
A lot of the parents need the same kind of validation in order for them to go on and to be able to relate to their own kids in a more supportive way. And here's something that we advise: the antidote parents can provide for this suffering referring to what's going on with their, in the home with the kids, can be found in the very same approach that I have suggested for general education: acceptance both of the child's strengths and of his and her present challenges, belief in his or her future, trust in his or her innate integrity, allowance of choices that are appropriate for him or her at that point in time, unconditional love. At the same time, the parent should be searching for the means to unblock any barriers the child wants to overcome, focusing first and foremost on what is bothering the child. Parents committed to a child's genuine search for meaning can greatly benefit from engaged hearts and freed spirits, their own. In other words, they themselves need to feel relieved. And if they recognize that what they could also help support their kids in unblocking the passages, the pathways that they're struggling along, the parents themselves feel better about themselves. And a lot of it has to do with the parents' own sense of lack of fulfillment that they're sort of giving over, imposing on their kids. If they recognize that they could be there for their kids as opposed to their kids being there for them in our confused way that we can get as parents, that a lot of times the parents themselves become empowered to be much more supportive, much more understanding. And it's the in a sense, the trip that their kids are on becomes their trip as well. And they can get to a place that is so much more reassuring. And as a result, there's less of lower the battle cry in the home and give them a sense really of being able to have meaningful rapport with their kids. It's in a sense,
it's a family dynamic. I mean, that's what family systems theory says, is that when one kid acts out in a family, it's actually the entire family that needs to get together on this. It's not just this kid is now the difficult kid.
Yeah, actually, Eve, it really, the way the school is run, the first interview is very extensive, and after the parents and the student spend time during the first interview, I've heard a number of parents who've said, "I wish I went to a school like Mellon." The other thing that is interesting is once the kid begins to change, the parent also is able to change. The kid over here, the student over here, in a sense, leads begins the process. And as change occurs, parents begin to change their whole concept of their relationship and their expectations. It's amazing. So the kids really over here, v'heshiv lev avot al banim, banim al avot. The kids will bring back the parents, etc. They have this power of bringing back their parents into a much more normal, productive, fruitful type of relationship with their kids. But it all emanates from the kid.
Oh, so the child becomes the teacher of the parent to some degree. Once in your school, they understand what they're all about. They can bring that home and perhaps heal the family to some degree. So that's fascinating.
Menachem has said to all of the students, we've gone, thank God, to so many weddings. We've been blessed with so many different happy occasions with them. And when they say that you were my principal, and Menachem insists, he says, no, you were my teacher. Mm-hmm. Because he learned from the students so much, and he wants them to know that they empowered him, and that so much that what they're about is about what they gave to him as well as to the rest of the school. So it's a very, very, some of the teachers refer also in the book to the fact that they grew to understand who they could be as professionals from their experience with the kids.
Wow, that's amazing. But let's say, like on a practical level, what's your tolerance on, let's say, drug use? Because a lot of times the kids who don't feel good about themselves, who are thrown out of school, to dull the pain, whatever it is, we all know the alcoholism, the drugs, that's like big where they run to. And how do you deal with that on that level?
Okay. First of all, we follow the standards of the Ministry of Education. There's no drugs in the school. I would say a certain percentage of students during all of the years that Melody has been running, drug is a symptom, and when kids begin to feel better about themselves, there is less need for dependency on alcohol, drugs, etc. We're certainly aware. And because they know we're aware, and they know that we accept them, even though they use drugs, it lightens up. It takes away the whole almost heaviness of the secrecy, defiance. We certainly will help those that ultimately will ask for help when it comes to drug rehabilitation. We certainly once in a while may even refer to some kind of residential setting in which they have expertise. I must say that I really feel very proud that most of the kids that have come to Mellon with drug problems, after studying in the school for a year, 2, 3, the problems dissipate, and it's not an issue anymore. Now, it's really quite amazing, because if you create the right environment, the kid may not necessarily have to have drugs. And then kids also are able to help the other kids who are on drugs. I feel very good about, dealing with this issue in a way in which the kids finally make their own decisions, take their own responsibility, and they know if they want to go on to the army, if they know they want to go into national service, and they know if they want to go on to the drug problems ultimately will hinder. And once these kids break the barrier of feeling good about themselves and valuing themselves and respecting themselves, and their friends are beginning, to reduce the amount of drugs or even begin to stop using drugs, it comes together. It's part of the package.
So now, is Melod considered a religious school? Do you have, in addition to the core studies that you have to have according to education ministry, do you also have religious studies? And does that mean that the kids have to be religious, or they can come? How does that work?
Okay. First of all, we're part of the religious school setting. We are totally non-coercive. We're co-educational, non-coercive. Those that ultimately want to complete a matriculation study at least have to take 1 or 2 courses that are part of the matriculation for the religious school setting.
So like the Bible matriculation exam or something?
Jewish history or Tanakh or etc. The other point is that we feel very good about kids that come to Mellon that either come from religious backgrounds and they sort of dropped out of religion, or kids that come from non-religious backgrounds. Since the school has created a very positive environment, there's a beautiful relationship between the kids that come from backgrounds and the kids that don't, and the non-coercive. And although most of the faculty are religious, there's no coercion. Kids,
there's no like mandated prayer time and you have to show up.
If I could try to translate it from Hebrew to English, it's not the skull cap that makes the person. It's the person that makes the skull cap. So our results sometimes have been amazing. Some of our students have gone on, to rabbinical study, and we have one student, I think, who's a judge in a religious court. It's easier. It's easier to. Kids are also looking for spiritual values. They're looking for relationships beyond teachers that are able to act as, and if the staff is religious but non-coercive, the kids can identify with these.
Setting an example as being a good person who has faith, and then that's somebody that you want to model after. So the book itself, Not at Risk. Leah, maybe tell us, Education as a Work of Heart, which is in English. If anybody's listening and saying, wow, this is something that I think I'd like to read and maybe try and apply to my own educational system, whether the people listening are educators or parents, where can they get a hold of the book?
Okay, well, for one, it's on Amazon. So they could easily just look up Not at Risk, and they can order it from Amazon. And otherwise, I know that they would have to then check in the city where they're in, because I know it's been distributed around, probably in Jewish bookstores for one, in the different cities. But we're not aware of exactly how widespread.
No, it came out not long ago. So yeah.
But I could only say that obviously they could get it. They could always order it on Amazon. And there are certain ideas, there are certain sources which Menachem hasn't mentioned. Anyone who's familiar with the model of Summerhill that A.S. Neal had created in the 1900s in England, and all I could say is that, and it's apparently still in existence, but the book was very well known worldwide. And one British visitor to the school, when he looked around at what was happening, he says, "My God, this is a Jewish Summerhill." So and the fact that Menachem's background was also in special education for his master's, and he has a whole background in psychology. So his doctorate is in child development. So that not only was he influenced, and he explains this in the book, influenced by Neil, but he was also tremendously influenced by Dr. Milton Erickson, who had a whole entire philosophy of brief transformation through analogic language, and how impactful that philosophy was on his approach in the school. So I could only say that, and the idea of the teacher as a mentor, as a spiritual mentor, as an educational mentor, not simply a purveyor of knowledge. So I could just say that we would love to be able to think that more kids and more parents and more educators could open their minds and hearts to understand, the issues involved on a greater level, so that the world could be a kinder place.
Instead of just having everything boxed in, and you go to school to get information, and then if you have issues, you go to your psychologist, and instead it's like all together, you're going to school with people who understand and who care.
School should be a living environment in which students really feel that they are being helped become productive members of society.
They can reach their potential, not based on what their grade is on a test. And that's really the bottom line. And I think it's high time that education goes in that direction, because there's too many people who they're maybe going through school, but they're not learning how to think for themselves. They're not reaching their potential. And we can't afford that anymore, not in any part of the world. So I want to thank you both so much. You've given me a lot of hope when it comes to the educational system, for sure. And anybody, if you're interested, Not at Risk, Education as a Work of Heart, by Menachem Gottesman, PhD, with Leah Leslie Gottesman, MA. Oh, I didn't know that was your middle name. So there you go. And I think that a lot of this book is really universal. Let's raise the next generation to to know themselves and what they can do and what they can't do. We can't all do everything. And I believe that Hashem gave everybody a gift and everybody uniqueness. And the tragedy is that many people go through their lives without ever finding out what that is because they're trying to be something else or conform to something else. And at some point, it just doesn't work. So thank you so much. And may we have, not just here in Israel, but in the world at large, but here especially in Israel, really a Shavua Tov. And once again, complete and full recovery to everybody who needs it everywhere. And a little... the good people should rock it this week. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Thank you so much to Tabitha and to Ben. You can always write to me, everybody, eve@thelandofisrael.com. Always happy to hear from you. So wasn't that a slightly more upbeat show on education than the one we had a few weeks ago? I think so. I'm trying. Take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.
If you want to improve relations between Israel and American Jews, one of the things that you should do is encourage people to listen to the Land of Israel Network. Listen to Eve Harrow, and listen to Yishai Fleischer, and listen to Ari and Jeremy, and Shlomo Katz, and listen to Mike Foyer, and listen to Josh Haston, because the Land of Israel Network has a mission, and that's to spread love between Israel and American Jews. There's so much to love about Israel. There's so much to love about Israelis. And I think the Land of Israel Network is part of the solution. You are all part of the solution.
You're listening to the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.